I've asked Colonel Bryan to be in a position to give us a feedback on any police department perspective relative to the article that was in the Post that was the Iraqi veteran who was in an apartment, a vacated apartment, and the police came in, and the story was in the Post, I think on Sunday. If you haven't seen it, I've got a copy of it right here. But Deputy Chief Ryan, is there any perspective that the department did the department get inquiries following that article, and has the department offered any insights or additional perspectives about the article?
And I apologize, I didn't have another engagement tonight, so you'll be leaving 4:08 tonight, so if you have to leave, it's not because I'm offended, I just have somewhere to go. We were notified, we obviously saw the article in the paper, and that prompted us to, on a different level to look into what the deal was, but we had actually gotten an inquiry on this early on, and I brought here with me Major Mike Klein, the commander of the Internal Affairs Bureau, who I'll defer to him to give me more detailed explanation as much as possible in terms of what we're doing and where we're at on this. But initially, an inquiry was done by the commander, and he did have contact with Mr. Horton. He explained the situation and why action was taken. And then it resurfaced with the article in the Washington Post, and then we're just working on that as well. But an inquiry was conducted initially. Now we're taking it out of the station, and we're doing it on the bureau level, because the IAB works for the chief of police, so the chief wants to make sure that everything that was done was proper and within policies and procedures in our department. So that's why the IAB has it. Mike, do you want to talk anything about it as much as possible?
Come on up to the table, please.
Sure.
Mike, can you tell us the date of the event?
Well, see, I can try to remember that, but I didn't come here with notes because actually Colonel Ryan told me as I was driving over here. But
Roughly.
the incident happened on June the 14th, okay? And then on June the 14th, the same day, later, the individual involved made his, I've talked better walking, and I had to throw the hands and all kinds of other stuff. So on June the 14th, Mr. Horton, who's the complainant, made a complaint with the line level supervisor of the officers' actions at the station later that same day, okay? Then that supervisor wrote up his summary of the complaint, which basically, isn't any different than what you really see in the Washington Post article. Mr. Horton pretty clear about the fact that while he doesn't have any complaints specifically about the police officers, okay, finds them to be professional, finds that they did the room clearing in a very efficient manner as he was trained to do in Iraq. What he had problems with is if the police department's policy is offline, if that's the way that the police officers are trained to do that kind of a room entry. Okay, so what we're doing, and in the newspaper article at one point, as part of what we're doing in our inquiry is to see if in fact, as Mr. Horton says, that the firearm was pointed at him, or whether or not the police officers were going in and doing the room clearing, and actually I was scanning through some of the documents, and the appropriate term is being used, were we at the ready gun position while we were doing the room clearing. Because while everybody who's read the article has the opportunity to know that the person who was in that apartment on that day, did have authorization to be there and was an Iraqi veteran who, by all accounts, belonged there and wasn't doing anything wrong that day, but to the dentist, okay. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the other thing that comes into this as we do our dentist, doesn't know that management has allowed somebody to go into that apartment, and the apartment's ajar, and his 911 call, which I've listened to, was pretty clear. There's a vagrant there, don't know, why there's somebody in there, but there's someone in that place, he doesn't belong there, and, we want the police to come and ensure that, my customers don't get bothered later, and my dentist's office has been burglarized before, so I don't know if this person's involved. So those are sort of, some of those details. Now, from a police officer's perspective, and I've been on the department for 33 and a half years now, and I spent the first 17 and a half years as a patrol officer and a patrol supervisor, and I spent 6 years as a station level patrol commander, and I spent 3 years as a bureau commander in patrol before coming back into internal affairs, and this is my third tour in internal affairs. From a patrol officer's perspective, going on a call like that with a vagrant, hindsight taken away as to who this person is, in my career, vagrants have been people who are homeless and just looking for a place to be for a night, and that's it. They're just looking to be there for a place for the night. Really bad drug addicts who are strung out at the time that they're in a place that they don't belong. People who are extremely intoxicated and hanging out in places where they don't belong. People who have been wanted for multiple warrants. People who have been fugitives from out of state. People who have been seriously mentally ill to the point that they need to be emergency custody ordered and taken to a hospital. So those are things in the back of the mind of the patrol officer as he's prepared to make that entry. The other thing that we do and train our officers to do is to knock and announce. Okay? Fairfax County Police, if you're in there, please come forward. By all accounts from the police officers and the dentist, that was done. In fact, the dentist described the knocking as very, very loud. And yelling into the apartment, very loud. As the account is by the gentleman in the newspaper, he didn't see anybody until he saw the officers with the weapons drawn. He also, he doesn't come out and say it in the newspaper article, but it can be pretty well inferred, and our investigation, indicates that he had spent the night before drinking rather heavily. He didn't hear the knock and announce because he was still in bed asleep when we went in. When someone doesn't respond to the knock and announce, okay, and we know someone's in there because we have an eyewitness in this case that says someone's in the room, next things come into our mind. Is the person now trying to secrete himself in that room? Or, even worse, is he trying to put himself in a position where he could prepare for an ambush as we come in to that apartment? So those are, perspectives that a police officer would have before they went into that. And so, as training would dictate, we would go into an apartment like that and do a room clearing with weapons drawn before we went in. And then once we had enough facts to determine that this is not a hostile environment, we de-escalate. And that's what happened. Yes, sir.
Mr. Horton says that it raised the point that there's a apartment security officer there who could have been contacted, and Lieutenant
The department security officer actually gave us the fob so that we could get into the secured part of the apartment complex. I had the privilege of working that area for, 18 of my years of my career, and that particular complex requires a fob to get into the outside of the apartment building, and then you would need another key to get into someone's actual apartment.
concerning me, Mr. Horton apparently was living in this apartment for several days because something's wrong with his apartment. And so Did they talk to the security guard that morning and say, is there supposed to be somebody in there or not?
I don't have that, I don't know that.
Well, that seems to me at least to be a box that should be checked.
Well, it
Checked.
is part of what we're
I understand that.
we're talking about. The other thing that's in that article that I do know the answer to is that the rental office wasn't open
It's Sunday morning, right?
until after the officers had completed this particular case.
Mike,
Sir,
during all of this, where was the dentist?
where was the dentist?
You said he was present.
His
Where was
suite is across the hall,
Where was he when the officers knocked on the door?
right outside in the hall.
Okay, they went into the room. Did he go in with
No,
them? He stayed outside the door?
that's correct.
So if there'd been a shootout, he could have been in the line of fire. If there'd been an ambush situation as you described,
He
the
was not,
dentist
he
was
was
at
not in
risk.
the same.
Was he at risk or not?
I can't
If
answer
he's
that.
outside the door, it sounds like he's at risk.
I can't answer that.
Okay,
I don't
that's
know.
fine. Now, when did they notify management, the manager of the apartment, or whatever this person is called? The superintendent, not the security guard, who in management was there?
I don't know that. We're still,
How long from the 911 call until the response? Until they
I-
arrived on scene?
if I knew that I was coming here to present that, I would have brought all
That's
the
my question,
materials.
why are we asking specifics? I thought we were just.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing the inquiry, we'll be more than happy to report back when the
Yeah,
inquiry's done.
I think the most pertinent aspect, the reason why I thought it would be appropriate for a little bit of dialogue on this evening is the matter of the ready gun versus directly pointed to the individual. We have been assured as a subcommittee that the ready gun is the appropriate response to a circumstance where there's not an immediate counter potential. And what this individual is saying is that not only was the gun pointed,
Well,
but it was also
right.
the supervisor acknowledged that that's the appropriate response.
Correct. Now, but I guess, Clayton, do you have access to that I can put up a video?
Sure.
The latest is the inquiry.
Yeah, internet access.
So we just have.
Oh, yeah, we need internet access.
Yeah, but we're kind of in the field of the dark.
It's a good point, good question. That's what we're trying to find out. Those are exactly the questions that Mike Shaw is asking.
Let me just say on point of the gun, I went on that practical that David White set up on John Lovis and I went on that last week, and one of the things we did was we went into a jewelry store to clear the jewelry store of a suspected burglar, and you sort of had to have the gun out, because if you didn't have the gun out and that person had a gun, now you weren't pointing it at anybody at that point in time because you didn't see anybody, you know what I mean? But Pete DeVilla's sort of discussion and advice was that you generally, when you go into a place that you don't know who's in there, your gun is out, because you don't have enough time if otherwise. You can have your finger beside it and whatever you feel like doing, but I could really see why you had to do that.
Well, I'm gonna show you a video that's right on point, okay? And I wish,
I think it's okay.
Yeah, it goes.
I think Phil's point was right on the head. It's not that the gun's out, it's that are you controlling a suspect at muzzle point
Yes, that's
unnecessarily?
right.
And I think that's what Mr. Horton pointed out in his complaint, that it wasn't that they came into the room ready to defend themselves, it's that when I woke up, I had guns pointing at my head. Because my body was hidden by the covers, I had guns pointing at my face.
well, but
He felt-
let me address that, okay?
That was his complaint.
But let me address that, okay? And I would be surprised that a military person, would not, recognize the difference between cover and concealment, because if someone's in a bed and they're underneath a blanket, okay, that's not gonna stop a bullet, okay? And we, when we train, our officers, when it comes time to have to deploy our weapons in a deadly force fashion, it's at center mass because it's the largest target for us to hit. And so to me, someone who's lying in a bed underneath a blanket, center mass is still available.
No arguments there, but I'm just telling you what Mr. Horton's
Yeah,
statement
I
was,
agree.
that the guns were pointed towards his head.
Yeah, and that's what we're looking into.
And we're,
That was his statement.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's what we're looking into.
So-
But we don't have the answers yet. Yeah.
So apparently, he was supposed to be there, and the management knew that he was there, but the management wasn't there to check. To to check with.
They couldn't confirm with management.
They
because
couldn't
the office was
Sunday morning,
closed.
yeah, right.
Because the office, the room was closed. So that was, I mean, that would have been the thing to do, but they weren't even there to check.
The security guy was, and he'd been there for a week. So the security guy probably knew he was in there.
If
Don't
they
know.
have to stop you to keep, the security person has instant access to the management. I mean, that's his job, so,
That's what the
They could've
info
stopped.
determined.
and ask that question.
So security guard should
Is
phone.
is it in alignment
Maybe
with
didn't know why they were.
Fairfax County Police Department policy that the dentist could have been there when they made the entry, and that he could have remained there during the search? Is that allowed for citizens to be that close?
When I show you this video, you'll see why
I
that's
just want
not a
to know
good
if that's in
idea.
conformance with policy. I don't care what the video shows.
Yeah.
Does policy
He's gonna
say that
answer your
citizens can
question.
be there?
He said he's gonna answer your question, but.
Who's going to answer? Who's going to show me a video? I
Yeah, but
wanna
he
know
said
what the
he
policy
Well,
was respond.
What's the general orders?
Look, let me just interject
Really,
here, guys.
the man came to just gave us a.
Can we take the tone down?
Let him,
Take Michael,
Brian was going to answer my
Michael.
question.
please, just bring the tone
I am
down.
bringing it up, but there's no need for Joe to interrupt.
If I can, I would say that I wasn't there, and I don't know where the dentist was, that's what the inquiry is going to determine, we'll find all that out, I just don't have those answers now. But officers do not, by rule, put individuals at risk. I mean, I would be surprised if the dentist was in the area where gunfire would occur. But I can't answer that for sure, because I don't know yet until the inquiry is done. Once that is done, I think we're gonna have it done, well, I don't want to put a time on it.
We have, one officer is on vacation, so we can't talk to them. At this point, we've talked to 2 of the 3 officers, and we haven't had an opportunity to talk to the supervisor as well. We have talked to the dentist, we've talked to Mr. Horton, we've talked to, I don't know that we've talked to the security guard at this time. Jervis, you might know that.
Not yet.
Okay. Did this show up over here, or? Yeah, probably audio would be great.
So, again, while we're waiting for this, what I would want our focus to be is on the policies. And what is the expectation of police officers when they do an event like, they take care of an incident like this, and if the supervisor is correctly quoted by Mr. Horton, I've read that to be different than the policy that I understood for use of force. But I would think it would be important for us to know whether the officer or the supervisor is quoted by Mr. Horton in here, whether that was in fact his statement, and if it was his statement, is that consistent with our policy?
Right. I'd be happy, I think by your next meeting, we probably will have all those answers, and it might be a better time to come back and
Okay.
answer all those questions. Good questions, I just don't have the answers.
So what are we seeing?
How do I turn the volume up? This is a very similar call, and you'll hear,
This is a vacant residence?
I'm sorry. She's telling that she's the owner of this property. No one's supposed to be living there. They had put up, had left the curtains open and had done some other things so that they could tell if somebody maybe had gone inside their property. The curtains were now drawn, and they had seen some other things so that they knew somebody was inside this trailer.
For a while, any signs of forced entry or somebody have a proof? Okay, so you wanna, so you, at this point, you don't know if anybody's in there, right? All right, why don't you let me go ahead and take a look at it all?
Is this from a body camera?
Yes, yes.
So let me clear it up.
Stand by.
Department, anybody in here? Show your hands.
There you go.
Make yourself known.
And this will be 12 minutes, and what's gonna happen next is backup officers are gonna come, supervisor's gonna come, and they're waiting for the next. You can decide if you wanna watch the rest of it.
No, I don't particularly want to take the time to watch the rest of
Okay,
it, no.
all right.
I think, we've gotten as much information, sounds like, as we can get it this evening, and I've got the assurance from the colonel that there will be whatever available information's available at our next meeting. If you're happy to report out on it.
Did the...
When is the next one, just so I...
At the
The
cops-
12th.
August the 12th? Yeah, I
Oh,
should be
did the
there.
person in there shoot at the officer in that video?
I thought it sounded like he did.
He might have.
I don't know, I'm asking, you've seen it.
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying, I was trying to do this computer.
Did the person in the house shoot at the officer?
I don't believe so. I believe that he was, and I don't believe that he did. I believe he was reaching for the weapon. I didn't read, there's an
Did he
article
see
with
the
it as
weapon?
well.
Yeah.
Oh, the officer definitely,
He saw a weapon.
yes.
Yeah, he
Yes.
said put the gun
Oh,
down.
put the gun down.
Put the gun down.
He had a gun in his hand.
Well, I think he was reaching for it, or he may have even had it. You can't see that, but you can hear that.
So that's why he shot, he thought he was going for a gun.
Yes, and there's an article associated with that that has a little bit more, and then an article that talks about this guy, and that's why I was talking about things that are in the mindset of an officer. This guy ended up having multiple warrants as well.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to move on.